Hey guys, Miss Singlefied here, answering guys' dating questions from a woman's perspective. Now this video is also going to be part of a live stream, so if you're watching this when it's not live, it may seem a little bit strange, but I will do more live streams down the line and give you guys more advance notice. The question I've been getting lately is, why do I go on date after date and it never amounts to anything? So I hear this a lot. It's like, you know, with online dating and just meeting people in general through apps, you can pretty much line up a date a day. I hear you guys. It's so hard to think about, like, dating is just becoming this lost art form. We're all getting really good at first dates. I've noticed this. And I say this a lot to people. It's like, just because you have a really great first date doesn't actually mean that you made a connection. And that kind of leads me to my answer to all of you who say, you know, why is it I go on date after date and they never amount to anything? It's because you haven't made an actual connection. So what's a connection? Here's a question. And Jordan55 says, I'm really good at date talk. Exactly. Everyone's so good at date talk these days. I mean, I think I can talk to a wall for hours and the wall would be entertained by me because it's like, you know, we put in our 10,000 hours. They say if you put in 10,000 hours into something, you become an expert. A lot of us have become an expert at first dates. So you do the same like small talk and you know like exactly what part of your life to tell that person to impress them. Maybe you bring a little bit of like your quirkiness and your sense of humor and you know to insert this here, insert that there, and bada boom, bada bang. You're like plug and chug and you walk away being like, that was a pretty good first date. And a lot of people feel this. They walk away from a first date thinking, yeah, you know what, that was pretty good. And then it's like you ask, do I want to see this person again? The sentiment usually is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind. And that's actually not a really good feeling after a first date. If you walk away from a first date thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that person again, it means that you didn't really connect. If you truly had a connection with someone, you would walk away from that date thinking, I can't believe this date just ended already. I want it to keep going, you know, or I can't wait to see this person again. It's that hell yes factor. If you don't walk away from a date thinking, hell yes, I want to see this person again, you didn't have a connection. And of course, the next date or the next date, you feel like it might get there, but if the first date you didn't have that connection, you already have a pretty weak foundation. Kaylee Michigan says, what if you get bored? Exactly, this happens because we're so good at dating that we don't actually listen to our dates. We're so concerned with providing the entertainment. You're kind of like the entertainment at a bar mitzvah. And then we forget to get to know the other person. Like, how many times have you walked away from a date, and a date that could have lasted like 8 hours? I hear this a lot. You go on these marathon dates and you walk away and you don't know anything about that person. Surface level, superficially, you know, like their family, their like job history, where they live, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's all surface level, but you don't actually get in deep into who they are. What are their values? What are their core characteristics? You don't know. You basically just met someone who is just a live version of their Tinder profile. So back to you, Kaylee Michigan, what if you get bored? Well, everyone's interesting in some way. So if you're getting bored, you're not asking the right questions. So here are some ways that you can have a deeper connection with someone, at least on a friendship level. I think that's the problem, is that sometimes we go on these dates with so much pressure. Like, you walk away from a first date thinking, could this be the love of my life? Well, how would you know? How would you actually know if this person could be the love of your life? You just spent a few hours with them. But you want to walk away from someone thinking, I think our values really align and I really want to get to know this person better. So here's some ways that you can connect better on a date. So instead of having like Jordan55, I'm really good at date talk, look at like the past 5 dates that you went on and think about all the topics you talked about, the date talk, the normal date talk. And on the next date that you go on, the next first date, try everything you can to stay away from that date talk that you're used to. So one way to get yourself out of your kind of like norm or out of your like comfort zone is to not do the things that you always do. So new outcomes only come out of new actions. So if you don't think about doing something new or act upon something new, your outcome is going to be exactly the same. Sometimes also mentally, you just have to get over that mental block that I need to change innately like what I am doing to find a better outcome. Because sometimes we tend to blame like the environment, right? We're blaming the apps and technology, we're blaming the other person for being boring. As soon as you place the blame on the other people or external factors, you've lost control of the situation because you can only control what you do. You cannot control your environment. You cannot control the other people that are on this date with you. You can only control your actions. So as soon as you get over that hump of being like, okay, the blame is on myself, then you're ready to take action. So when you step out of your comfort zone and you think about, okay, I don't want to talk about, normal date talk. Well, you still have to get to know the other person on a very surface level. So of course you get all of that out of the way. Like, tell me about your, what do you do right now? And where did you go to school? And tell me about your family, your siblings, etc. Get that out of the way really fast, but when they start answering your questions, get curious. And this is like a key word. Get curious about it. If I ask someone tell me about what you do, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm a software developer for this. Well, I live in San Francisco, so everyone's like software developer, engineer, or whatever. I'm a software developer for the startup, and I moved here a year ago from Ohio to, take on this pretty sweet gig. Okay, the next question usually for a lot of people is, okay, now you've answered a question about you. I'm gonna tell you about what I do. So most people would take that right back and say, okay, that's awesome. I also moved to San Francisco 2 years ago from LA, and I want to pursue this career in tech sales or something like that. And then when it's like tit for tat, it becomes very generic. Then it's just like tennis, right? You say something, I say something, you say something, I say something. But here's something you should try. When you get curious, and if you say, okay, what do you do right now for a living? And they say they're a software developer for this company, and they give that answer. Then you say, how did that make you feel moving here? What was that move like? Get curious. The move is interesting, right? To go from Ohio to California is a very big jump. What was that like? Did you have to leave family and friends? How did you feel when you first got to San Francisco? Boom. You're starting to expose who this person is on a much deeper level. And if they're willing to, they can get very vulnerable with you. A question as simple as, how did that make you feel? Could open up a whole new layer of someone. They could say something like, you know what, I actually was very hesitant because I was comfortable in Ohio and I am very close to my family and friends. And so moving to a new city where I didn't know anybody was really scary. Okay, so then they start exposing some of their vulnerabilities. And then as soon as you feel like they're getting a little vulnerable themselves, you take it back, because on a first date, you don't want to get too vulnerable. You don't want to end up with someone crying their eyes out, right? So you want to say that's interesting you say that, because when I moved to San Francisco, I couldn't wait to get away. I was looking for an escape. And I was in this dead-end job, a dead-end relationship, and I was so looking forward to moving to a new city. But when I got to San Francisco, I felt that loneliness because I didn't know anyone and everyone seemed like they already had their circle of friends. That conversation right there, do you feel like the tone of it, the environment, the ambiance? It's almost like in a movie where the music kind of softens and the lighting softens, and then it's just two people connecting. It's not so much like, tell me about your resume. It's more like, I'm curious about you. Tell me more about that. Ludacris from Spain, that's a great name. What are some off-limit topics? Another great question. I know there's some rules about don't talk about politics and religion on a first date. You know what? Throw those rules out the window. You should talk about whatever means the most to you. For some people, having someone who has the same views as them politically is very important. So why should you avoid that topic? For other people, religion's very important. If I'm Christian, I want you to be Christian. So why not bring up that topic? I think on a first date, you should be very open-minded. And I think you never know where that conversation will go. You can't go into a date being like, I'm gonna talk about this, this, and this, and I'm gonna avoid this, this, and that. You can't be that rigid on a date. There are no off-limit topics. If you do bring up something where you feel that the other person doesn't feel comfortable talking about, or they're a little bit sensitive to it, then that's up to you to be observant, and you can be curious about it. Say something like, you know what, I feel like you seem a little bit uncomfortable with this topic. Should we change the topic, or do you want to talk about why it makes you uncomfortable? And that way, the person you're on a date with feels like they're being seen and heard. And that's the very last lesson I want to leave you guys with before we end this live stream today, which is everyone wants to be seen and heard. So when you're on these dates, you want to think about how you want your date to be seen and heard. To be seen, I see that you're uncomfortable, or I see you're really excited about this topic. To be heard, I heard you say this. I heard you say that you feel like this is very important to you. This is absolutely a deal breaker for you. I heard you say that. So you want to keep paraphrasing it, also keep telling them what you're observing about them. Your date will walk away thinking that they were seen and heard. And you can walk away knowing that you saw your date, you heard your date, you understood them. If you come into any date with this goal in mind, you'll never think the date is boring, because nobody's actually boring. The boring dates are when you don't dive deep into the core of who someone is. And those are first dates that will never lead to second or third dates. If you're in dating, okay, and your end goal is to meet someone that you really want to connect with, you should be more curious and make sure that your date is seen and heard. As long as you're observant about the person you're with and you get curious, you can connect with someone at some level, no matter who they are. And that's what human connection is all about. It's not about like getting an end goal of what I'm benefiting from this. It's not about you. It's about the other person. And with that said, you've been Singlefied.